Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. The topic this time is Making a Case for the Cloud. This webinar is hosted by the ABA Legal Technology Resource Center, and speaking today will be Dan Feinstein, Senior Cloud Computing Strategist of Adar IT. The Legal Technology Resource Center is an ABA member benefit provided by the ABA Law Practice Division. You can find a variety of legal technology articles, guides, videos, and other resources on our website at lawtechnology.org or our blog, lawtechnologytoday.org. Also be sure to check out the new ABA Legal Technology Buyer's Guide at buyersguide.americanbar.org. Dan brings over 12 years of sales leadership and company building expertise to Adar. Currently, he manages Adar's headquarters in Chicago and international sales team. Dan's teams are the first point of contacts for new clients. They evaluate the business needs of the clients and develop technology solutions to meet those needs. Dan handles partnerships development, contract consultation, and brand building. Previously, Dan developed and managed sales and marketing teams for 2 startup companies and launched his own startup venture. Thank you all for joining us. We'll now begin the webinar.
Great, thank you. As Rose mentioned, I've had the pleasure of working with law firms over the last 4 years, specifically in the cloud space. And we have many things to cover today, so we'll jump in. So the topics will be, as a firm, what are the strategies for IT that are cloud-related that are important to look at? And as you're looking at cloud partners, what are the right questions to ask? And we'll take a look at what a business case for the cloud would look like as well. So as far as the benefits, I mean, if you look at the marketplace 2 or 3 years ago, everyone was asking, is the cloud the right way to go? And as we've seen all the market trends showing that the model itself and technology is moving very much towards the cloud, and all the companies from big ones like Microsoft and Amazon are utilizing cloud, all the way to smaller companies and niche players as well. So what's happened in the last 2 years is that the marketplace has changed from asking the questions, is the cloud the way to go, to now which type of cloud is best for my firm? And the reason that changed is that as the technology became more mature and more companies began developing and providing this model, the benefits became very clear to law firms. And we've highlighted a few of them right here. So one of them is data security. So we'll talk about how in a cloud scenario, data can be much more secure opposed to running it in-house. There can be very substantial cost savings that can be derived from not having in-house systems maintained but putting them in a cloud model. Remote access, if anyone's used email from Gmail or equivalent, has had great experience as far as how to access and leverage remote access the cloud has to offer, and that could be implemented in other parts of the IT system as well, which we'll discuss. Scalability, so as companies grow, add more law firms, do mergers, acquisitions, the cloud has been a tremendous benefit. And general performance. So a lot of firms that we've seen tend to hold on to systems perhaps longer than they should, and performance suffers. Where in cloud model, the performance stays the same day 1 and year 2 and 5 ongoing. And we'll talk about how that's done. So the first question is, where is the cloud from a business and technology standpoint? So anytime you think of any type of cloud, be it private or public or hybrid, and we'll talk about the differences in a minute, it really just means that your systems, whatever they may be, from email to document management to potentially the entire IT system, is residing in a data center located off-site. And data centers are broken down to different tiers or different levels of security. And most providers you work with, you want at least a tier 3. What does that mean? It means a facility that is multi-million dollars to build out, has 24/7 physical monitoring, multiple power connections, multiple internet connections, and the outcome of these facilities that the systems sitting inside are as physically secure as they can be and remotely accessible from any device anytime. So I'll use an example that many of you are familiar with. If you've ever used Gmail, Google, obviously, has a data center or data centers which they house their facilities. And when you access their emails, you're accessing some data center somewhere in the world that is hosting one's email. But that applies to any type of cloud model. So ostensibly, cloud equals a data center, and what services are offered in the data center from email or potentially entire IT system determines what type of cloud is being offered. So if you look at the type of services that can be in the cloud, as you see from their diagram, there are many of them. So we won't go through each one because that will take quite a while. But what I've done is broken them down into 3 main buckets. So define the first one as a public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. So public cloud, a great example would be Gmail. So what makes Gmail a public cloud is the fact that one is sitting on a conceptually shared system where the difference or the separation between users is just username and password and potentially 2-factor authentication. So for example, in a public cloud like Gmail, if one wanted to have their own customizations or anything that's beyond what everyone has, there's limitations because it's conceptually one large system that is shared. In a private cloud, what makes it private is the fact that there's a piece of the data center that is built for each client, and any type of services or products or software packages that run in-house can run the exact same way in a private cloud. So if you think of companies like Rackspace or a data center themselves or Adar, what these companies do is they go into a data center, they own on behalf of clients via high-end enterprise-grade hardware, and on top of that hardware, they'll take existing systems that a client is running in-house, like their email, like their Word Docs and iManage and any other applications they're used to, and then build them out from the ground up, put them in a data center, where now it's practically maintained, disaster recovery, and remote access for those systems. So what makes it private is the fact there's much more separation and customization of what's sitting in the cloud, opposed to a public cloud where there's usually a single application that's shared among users. A different category, a third category, identifies hybrid cloud. So what makes something hybrid is there can be a mix. So let's say, for example, a company has brand new desktops and they want to leverage those but put their main business software packages off-site managed by a third party, like a Rackspace or a data center or perhaps Adar. So in that scenario, the servers and applications can reside off-site, but the company continue leveraging their new desktop investment to get to their systems. So going back to the private cloud for a second, there's even options where the desktop itself can reside in the cloud also next to the servers, and the users would just have a flat screen monitor that would connect them from their office to the system. So those are the main 3 types of cloud, and when you're looking in the marketplace, it's really important to understand the pros and cons of them and which strategy is best for your firm. So I've identified 5 main areas to look at when you're considering the public, private, or hybrid cloud. And there's obviously advantages and disadvantages to all of them. So we'll start with the security layer and compare security between the 3 main cloud categories. So when it comes to a public cloud, the advantage is that you have tremendous economies of scale, but the security is limited relative to a private cloud. So for instance, in a public cloud, the main security is a password or a 2-factor authentication. And beyond that, everything else is primarily shared between users. In a private cloud, there can be much more separation on a physical layer as far as firewalls and routers and other portions in the system that can provide a more differentiation of security between one client and the next. So from the security standpoint, private cloud tends to provide the most security, and the trade-off being that it becomes a little less cost-effective because it's more customized opposed to a more standard solution. When looking at remote access, it's really across the board. All of the public, private, and hybrid cloud provide equal remote access from any device, anytime. So a great example would be companies that are looking to put their servers and desktops in the cloud can now work on any device, including iPads, be in the office, have a document open, go to Starbucks, take an iPad, log into the cloud desktop, and be able to work on the same document they had before. So when looking at remote access, that's one of the huge advantages that any type of cloud has to offer. From the customization standpoint, going back and starting with the public cloud, like a Gmail, Google, I'm just using that as an example, is a fantastic product to host and provide one service being email. But if you go to Google and say, look, I want to host my document management, that's not what they do. And if you want to have very extensive customizations of their Gmail platform, a function of private cloud is it limits the customization one can have. Opposed to if one looks at a private or a hybrid cloud, since those are generally built from the ground up and customized to each company's needs, there could be much more flexibility as far as what systems, what document management, what accounting systems reside off-site, but still take advantage of the redundancy and remote access of a cloud system. From a cost perspective, most cloud models are per month per user. So sometimes the per month per user includes just email. Sometimes the per month per user includes the entirety of one's IT from hardware, software, and ongoing support. With a public cloud, and because there's the most economies of scale, the per user cost is the most cost effective. When you look at a private or public or hybrid cloud, they will be more per month per user, but the advantage being there's more customization and more services provided as part of that model. From a maintenance perspective, either public or private cloud, generally support comes with the solution. With a private cloud, the challenge from a maintenance perspective has to do with if you're running multiple systems, some in-house and some in the cloud, there still needs to be a company or internal resources to manage the different vendors. So going back to the high level of the cloud advantages in a cloud model, one of the things that oftentimes we ask our clients to take a look at is how to justify and create a business case for the cloud. One common place to start from is looking at it relative to the in-house model. So the in-house model, what are common challenges that many of you may have experienced at some point? The power going out, or a physical server or desktop failing, or being out of the office and having very slow or remote access, or general troubleshooting. So all those things that traditionally, to some degree, cause challenges when a company is running their systems in-house, those can drastically be eliminated with various degrees depending on the cloud model that the one is taking a look at. So that's looking from the standpoint of how to leverage cloud to eliminate common challenges in in-house systems. Going to the revenue or cost reduction standpoint, in most cloud scenarios, the need for capital expenditures of servers or desktops or even licensing becomes greatly diminished. So opposed to the traditional in-house approach of going through a cycle of maintaining hardware, replacing it, and licensing, the financials of most cloud models changes from a capital expenditure to so for instance, in Adar's model, we deploy something called IT as a service, where we provide our clients migration from any of their in-house applications to a private cloud, as well as utilizing something called virtual desktop to have a real Windows 7 desktop in the cloud, then providing the licensing, the disaster recovery, and the ongoing IT support to optimize that experience. So that's one model of how to create a more predictable IT cost through leveraging the cloud. Another way to look at it is companies that are in high growth mode, very common, go through the challenges of how to scale not just HR and the staff, but how to scale technology as well. And when it comes to scaling, any of the cloud models offer tremendous advantages. So be it adding new employees, adding new office, having more remote users, or going through an acquisition phase, once systems, be it one system like email or the entirety of a system is residing off-site, a company is able to leverage the economies of scale and efficiency that the cloud partner has to very quickly add new users, add more applications, add more functionality in a predictable cost structure that generally is very difficult to do when the system is residing in-house. So if we look at a very quick business case, and there's various ways to create a business case for the cloud. A very common one is something that law firms generally don't do, and that is analyzing what is the cost of productivity loss. And when I say productivity loss, that can be as a function of hardware failure, power going out, a major update that happened in the system that took longer than expected, the aggregate thereof. So if we look at a common law firm, let's say 70 employees, assuming the average revenue per employee of $150,000, transferring to $10.5 million of revenue, on a per day basis, should there be any type of productivity loss, it's about $40,000 a day as a function of revenue. And on an hourly basis, about $5,000. So one of the things that a lot of law firms, as a follow-up to this presentation, do is take a look at, over the last 1 or 2 years, on aggregate, how much time was there lost, how many billable hours were not optimized because of some technology inefficiency. And generally that number becomes much more than many would like. So just using that one aspect of cloud, leveraging the redundancy and the performance of an enterprise-grade system off-site, oftentimes that in of itself is more than sufficient to justify the investment, not to mention the intangibles that we had discussed. So the next thing we'll cover is when you're looking at any type of cloud offering, is your company in a position to even consider it? And there are 3 main questions to take a look at. One is connectivity. So unbelievable, even in today's almost 2015 marketplace, there are plenty of areas, even in major cities, where internet connectivity, at least fast internet connectivity, is not available. So the first question is to understand, depending on the cloud strategy one wants to implement, what is the prerequisite bandwidth, and is that available? So for instance, in Adar's model, where we're able to put the entirety of the IT system, including the desktops, in the cloud as well, our rule of thumb is half a meg down per concurrent user. So let's say there's a law firm of 50 employees in one location, 25 megs down will be sufficient to cover that location. Another aspect to look at is software packages. So if one is considering a combination of the public cloud and private cloud, it's important to understand the software packages one currently uses, are they compatible? So meaning that, is the current software vendor providing their own public cloud version, and does that meet the law firm's requirements? Or if one is considering a private cloud vendor, can they take their existing software packages and put that in the private cloud? And that really comes down to the type of technology that's being offered. And that's beyond the scope of this discussion, but it's important to understand from a compatibility standpoint, do the current software packages, are they available and compatible for the cloud strategy you're considering? Another one is from the support strategy, is what, as we spoke about earlier, depending on the type of cloud model one is considering, what impact does it have on support? Does it mean that the cloud vendor is able to offset some of the outside vendors that currently are in place or internal IT staff, or did it become an extension, the current department or current third-party vendor? So those are really important questions to vet out as a starting ground to see whether cloud is even a consideration for your law firm. Now, when you've, in the process of looking at different partners, and you decided that the prerequisites have been met, what are some key questions to ask? So we've identified a few of them that we'd like to share with you. So one is specifically experience in cloud IT solutions. What's happening in the space is that because cloud is becoming so popular, and it agreed upon that it is the model going forward, that is a company either beginning their cloud practice and building expertise in that space, or have they been there for a long time and gradually evolved and been able to build the cloud practice over time? So the last thing one wants to be is in a scenario where they're a proving ground for new technology or a new company. Another important question is industry experience. So there are lots of companies that are in the space and have lots of expertise, but they may not necessarily be in a legal space. And even though legal technology has similarities with other industries, there are a lot of unique elements that are in place as well. So it's important to understand how much experience the partner you're considering has in the legal space. Another important question to take a look at is the SLAs and the data centers. So from the standpoint of deploying technology in the cloud, there's a few different ways of doing it. Certain companies that are getting into the business model as of recently will go to a data center, as we discussed recently, leverage the data center's existing hardware, and provide their services on top of it. The downside of that approach is that should there be an issue, the IT vendor does not has a certain amount of control they don't have because the data center owns the hardware they don't. So it's really important to understand what type of data center is being utilized. And there's from Tier 1 to Tier 4 with different implications of security and redundancy, and who owns that hardware in the data center. And they'll tell you a lot about really what the core of the business model is and the implications it has to you and your clients. Another one is a service level agreement, meaning that should something occur, what are the guarantees that the partner has that they'll fix the issue? What portion will they not guarantee? And are they willing to create a financial penalty for them should they not meet their SLAs? So a lot of companies that have been entering the space don't have SLAs at all because they haven't quite proven the model out. And ones that have been more mature in the market will have well-developed ones and often different tiers of SLAs depending on the requirements of the law firm. Other questions as ownership of the data. So should one move to a model, say public cloud and private cloud, and decide to leave for whatever reason, is the data in a proprietary format? And if it is or isn't, how would one get it back and guarantee that the vendor does not own it anymore and is able to be erased? Another question to ask is lock-in. So this goes back to the question of having proprietary standards. So many companies will provide some of a proprietary standard in which they hold their data, and therefore if a company wants to leave, they'd have to pay very substantial fees to take the data from the cloud vendor and move it somewhere else. So for instance, with Adar, we don't use any proprietary systems. We take what's the best and breed in the marketplace and provide our services around it. And there is vendor lock-in in that way is enacted against. It's important to ask any partner you're working with what that strategy is should you want to leave. And the last one obviously would be industry references to make sure that the companies work in their space and what the remote access support and other aspects of the business that are relevant to the scenario. So to do a quick wrap up, who is Adar? We are a company that focuses on private and hybrid cloud solutions. We've been doing it for 9 years, and that's been our exclusive focus. We're very proud to be an ABA Premium Solutions provider as of beginning this year, I believe. We've been providing these services for over 9 years. At this point, we have 140 full cloud migrations across the country and internationally. And at the beginning of this year, became venture-backed by a company that very much believed in our model and the support focus we have, headquartered in Chicago.